So within a half an hour of getting back to the base, I was locked up. Boom. After getting back from the operation from the bush of Angola. And straight away, we had heard that there's another operation. As we walked in, we heard this guy speaking about there's another big operation going to happen real soon into Angola, big one. And we were involved in it. But now I was locked up and charged. The rest of Delta Company took off. There was no break in between. We just got back. Then they took off to go train for the next big operation.
By the August, we were then sent to Oshibela for 3 weeks training. And what then transpired was we dug trenches and we did trench clearing for 3 weeks, and we did base attacks, and we didn't know the bases had code names, so we didn't know where the bases were. We were locked in Oshibela.
Round about 79, 80, the incursions from SWAPO were increasing.
The SWAPO bases again moved in closer to the border because it was not possible for them to operate inside South Africa and remain there. They had to operate from a temporary base short away the other side of the border, cross the border, do quickly some damage, and then come back again. And then Protea was the operation which we carried out, not as deep as the Kasinga operation or the Skeptic operation, but we still cleared the area immediately north up to Parabat and those places inside South Africa.
We were about 3 weeks away from finishing our point training, where we had the opportunity to go and pass that weekend, but the officers bluffed us and then said, whoever stays behind, we're going to do a operation against the commandos to keep the commandos on their toes. And I thought, well, okay, this will be quite great, get some more experience and gain some more experience. The Saturday came, nothing happened, and the Saturday afternoon, the officers came to us and said, guys, prepare your kit, you're going to the border. Wow, we were shocked. We thought, what the hell's going on here? So yes, we prepared our kit, we drew our ammunition and all this type of stuff, and and we were off as the Fire Force group. I think we were about 12 guys, and we were going to be the Fire Force backing our seniors up in Undangwa. And when we reached there, we found out that we were actually part of Operation Protea.
So I spent 3 weeks just hanging out there, going to see the lawyer and coming back and what have you. And finally, the court-martial came about 3 weeks later. But all this time, Delta Company's up training for this big operation, and everybody's got rumors of this big operation. And I'm thinking, boy, I'm going to miss this. I'm missing the big game. I'm going to miss this. So court-martial day comes. I think it was in the morning. Go there, facing all these fellows in the court-martial. I didn't get DB, but I had a suspended sentence, which was quite a long suspended sentence, and that's in the morning. And I was told, don't set a foot wrong. You do anything wrong for the next 3 years, you're in big trouble. Lock you up. I go back, and I tell the officer in charge of where I was, that I want to rejoin my Delta company, because they're training for this big base. So I want to rejoin them. He says, no, you're staying right here. You're going nowhere. So within 1 hour of being court-martialed, I packed my stuff and I go AWOL. So that's not too smart. So within 1 hour of being told not to set a foot wrong, I go AWOL. But I go AWOL towards the battle. I go to find my guys. I didn't know where they were, but all I knew is I'm hitchhiking somewhere out there to find where they are. And it's quite funny. This is the funny part. So I do get a ride there, and a truck driver takes me, a water truck driver. And he drops me and he says, oh, yeah, walk through the bush. Your guys are right there.
So we had been training hard, and we were tired, and we hadn't been home for a long time. And the next thing, Ranger Korf came walking through the bush, and and he said, guys, the court-martial, I got off. And he said, what's wrong with you guys? Why are you so lethargic? And I said, we've been training all this time, we're going into the hectic op. It's going to be the biggest operation that South Africa had incurred since the Second World War.
So we walk through, I find them there. These guys they looking very down and full on. They got long hair. They've been sleeping in the dust and everything. They've been training for this operation. They've been training attacking bunkers, attacking trenches for the 3 weeks that I haven't been there.
We were hungry and had no beer, and the next thing we hear this voice just out of the blue, just and there's Saki Murray, our sergeant major from our battalion. They've sent him up to come and be with us in the spy fight. Within half an hour, we had the best food, we had beers, we had everything, and he organized.
We initially sit down in order group format. The same model is utilized. The situation is shared, a mission is shared, the objective is shared, as well as how one is to achieve the objective. We then go and replicate that, building our own SAN model and trying to make it more specific for the fault group, so to speak, as opposed to the battalion. I
get there and they say, we're leaving tomorrow morning, 4 o'clock. We're going across the border on the big attack. So I just made it. But I had no training. So I got trained. Sergeant Major Saki Murray says, train this guy. Hey, you, train this guy about diving into bunkers, getting into trenches. Show him. So I got trained by my mates there in an hour, what they were trained in for 3 weeks, And the next day we went in.
The way we did it was to go in near Xangongo, near the Kanemi River, go into Angola that way. That was the first thrust, and the first target that the army had was Xangongo. Before we could take out Xangongo, the Air Force side of Protea was as a separate plan known as Operation Knife, and that called for the day before Protea started. We, the Air Force, would do attacks, autonomous Air Force attacks on the air defense systems that the Angolans had put up. In other words, their radar stations. And they had a huge big radar station at a place called Chibemba, which covered our whole area, and that was our main sort of target. So the day before Protea started, that's what we did.
Before the SWAPO were the beef was against. Now the rules had changed. We were taking on FAPLA, the Angolan regular army, taking them on as well. So we're going to hit their bases, and they got tanks. They have jets, fighters. Cubans. There are 40,000 Cubans in southern Angola. 40,000 Cubans, and Russian advisors are there as well.
The task force was divided into smaller task forces. The one was Task Force Alpha, under command of Colonel Hubert, very famous guy with regards to mechanized warfare. He really understood the tricks of the trade. And then Task Force Bravo, which was the counterinsurgency task force under command of Colonel Vos Bernardi, a good soldier who understood counterinsurgency warfare.
It was a mechanized attack. There was a convoy of, I would say a 10-kilometer convoy of vehicles into Angola.
I was part of the conventional strike force under command of Colonel Hubert. I commanded Battle Group10, which in actual fact was 6-1 mechanized battalion. The main enemy for that preemptive strike, which was conventional warfare, was against FAPLA's brigades who held Xangongo and Ongiva. And of course, my battle group was responsible to fare into Angola across Kalawek. In other words, we did the left flanking part of the attack. And one of my main functions was to keep the enemy brigade at Kahama, 21 Brigade, out of the fight.
D Company of 1980-81 was the main attack force. There was another company with us, H Company. They were also part of the main attack force, but they were more seconded to the Ratel Company, to 6-1 Meg. So they worked together with them.
We went in from the top. We were basically a stopper group in that operation. We, however, had to flush terrorists out of safe areas like hospitals and churches and riverbeds, and that was our job really. That was an interesting op in that the main fire force group was our fellow company, D Company, they saw a lot more action on that operation than we did.
Delta Company was part of Battle Group 20, and we then attacked across the border and we took out a town called Xangongo. We were then sent into Ongiva, and in Ongiva we took the Air Force base and we took the military base. So we were the spearhead of the operation. To the right and the left of us we had 2 infantry battalions that were fighting with us.
Started at 6 a.m. with the Mirage jets. Our jets coming from miles high, coming down, straight down like this vertical, dropping 1,000-pounder bombs onto the base. And these guys are firing back at them with the ZU-23s. The ZU-23 is a Soviet anti-aircraft gun. It shoots 2,000 rounds a minute, each barrel, and it's got 2 barrels. And the rounds are this big.
We had heavy strikes with Buccaneers, Canberras, Mirages, everybody. And even the Impalas were involved in that.
So it was quite a show watching. It felt like looking at some Vietnam footage or something like that, you know. Watching these jets, our jets, South African jets, falling out of the sky like arrows from miles high, with these guys shooting AK on them. And we were in the vehicles, ready to go in, and watching this with our heads down. And they bombed half an hour. And a 1,000-pound bomb is a hell of a bomb. So the noise is amazing. We had never heard anything like it before.
At one stage we had something like 100 and something fast jets at Ondongwa airfield. And in fact it was too many for that airfield because it's not a big airfield. You know. We were very vulnerable to attacks from enemy aircraft if they had to come back. So we did our attack, we pulled off, the army then moved in.
So now it's our turn to go in. So we drive in, and we getting fire, and we got our heads down, and finally we get in front of the first trench, as we had been told that there's a tar road, and when we got close to that, the trenches are beyond that, and then we employed, but we under fire, we couldn't move. Dived out, everybody ran 10 feet, and nobody could move. Soon they had those anti-aircrafts that were shooting at those planes. They turned it down onto us.
They had elevated their guns 9 inches off the ground and they were firing down with these ZU-23s.
It's an incredible sound. When that ZU-23 is shooting over your head, it's around this big. It shoots, so with one burst, in a 5-second burst, you probably got 50 rounds going over your head.
We were really subjected to effective enemy fire where we tried to wiggle ourselves and the bodies into the ground because that was effective enemy fire, just going over our heads, and we were brought to a grinding halt for a hell of a long time.
And then the jets came in and did another bombing run. And that freed us up. But there was a whole lot of stuff that went on there. You got your cheek into the dirt. You're making yourself as flat as you can. Bullets cracking right over you, thinking that this is it. Any minute now, you're going to get a bullet through the head, and your brains are going to be in the sand next to you, you know. But that wasn't the worst of it, because the anti-aircraft gunner kept us pinned down. Just when you thought he had quit, and you'd move forward, he'd shoot again. And we had big tree limbs crashing behind us from these rounds. It was amazing. We had a couple guys hit, one guy in the hand, one guy in his leg, and everybody shouts, "Medic, medic," and that medic comes. He comes running, he comes crunched over, gets him and pulls him back. The medics did a good job.
And one incident, my sergeant said to me, "Delaney, just have a little look over the wall." I said, "You have a little look." And as I lifted my helmet to look over the wall, they shot this big branch off the tree, and it landed right on, and I realized then that I'm laying in a shithole, and I'm fighting from this position. So we were pinned down. The Rattles and the Noddy cars were withdrawn for a section.
A tank came out at us, you know, all the guys running back, and then we had one of our South African armored cars came from behind, right through us. Because we were all running, and we dived down. He came around the side, stopped, bam, took out the tank. Then it eased up a bit, but for the first 3 hours there, it was a real deal, you know.
In a normal battle, if the army got into position where they were having difficulty, they would then withdraw a certain distance. They would call us in, we'd arrive in the area, and then as we pitched up to do the attack, they would describe it to us on the run-in, so we knew what we were going to look for. As we pitched up, then we as pilots would shout smoke, and they would then throw smoke grenades, okay? And then all of a sudden out of the bush you'll see a line of smoke grenades coming out, and then you know to the one side are our troops and the other side are the bad guys, and then you can go at it, then you're free to fire.
We had LSD, Lugseildienst, with the Mirages, and we called in a strike from the Mirage, and the Mirage pilot said, move back 50, and we said negative, we cannot move back 50, take the hit. And the first one came in. I've never seen anything as fast as that in my life. French Mirage F1, and the first one just released a bomb. I've never seen a bomb that size in my life, but it felt like when the bomb hit, it felt like the ground was going to suck us in.
A little Bosborg light aeroplane, and the pilot had smoke rockets used for marking targets, and he came in and took out that 23mm guns with his smoke rockets. He got the enormous crooks for that, a very brave thing to do, because with a light aeroplane like that, you've got to get down and dirty, right in amongst the enemy guns and so on. So well-deserved enormous crooks that he got for that.
Sergeant Major Marie was getting highly bedoned, and he was going near, and the next thing he turned to my Captain Leipold and he said, Captain, we must attack. And I said, no, we don't, we stay in here until we got enough firepower to eradicate them. And the captain just nodded his head and said, okay, go for it. And he shouted, "Ere company, stand up." And I thought, Delaney, you big coward. I was behind my weapon like trying to get a little bit of cover out of my weapon. And I thought, you're the biggest coward. And I looked at my buddies and they were all down in that position. But then we do a thing called battle talk, where we encourage one another and we start screaming and shouting, and the fire in your heart just rises up and you become this warrior of absolute note.
We would do fire and movement through the target, and what we found is that there were a lot of trenches dug and a lot of bunkers. So we moved through the target, we had quite a lot of contact, and right up to the airstrip. And the next day, after what they call it normally D+1, we moved back through the target again, and then we gathered all the information, all the intel, all the weapons that we could, and that we did for the next 3 days.
Anyway, after 9 days, we came out of that battle, and somebody called me and they said, Delaney, there's a mate of yours to see you, and I couldn't reckon in my mind that I had anybody else other than these paratroopers that were around me. That's how intense. And I walked over, and it was my friend Brett from school, Brett Dismore, and he said, John, how are you? And I said, but I've been fighting. And he was a tanker driver. He brought in fuel for the choppers. And he said to me, how's your sisters and your mom? And suddenly then I realized, flip, I made it through this hectic battle. And that wasn't the last of the battles, After that, we did Operation Daisy.